Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you. In the email I sent out, I asked a rather heady question about the nature of life and what it means and so on, which we're not going to be able to answer. At least I can't answer, except to say that we're more humble than we think we are. Of course, we're the star of our own movie, and our lives are important to us. But in the scheme of things, we're just connected through a stream from everybody that came before us to everybody who will come after us. And so we're more humble in some ways, and we forget that, and we forget to live according to our own truth and our own needs and try to serve others by living out their opinions and dreams. So it's complicated being alive. And I wanted to, review or talk about the concept of the soul in Kabbalah. This, by the way, is somebody once asked me if I believed that this was completely true, what I'm about to tell you or talk about. It's in my book. Well, I don't know, but it's a very useful way, I think, a very useful and practical explanation for the way we are ordered, the way we are created, which might help us understand consciousness, because we often feel that, we don't know how to get out of this little house we made for ourselves, which sometimes can become a trap. We don't understand how to raise consciousness. It all seems very mysterious to us. And of course, there are many people who will show you, some of them are tried and true paths to, opening up consciousness and beginning to see the world differently. But the first thing is to see it as a journey. We're on a journey, and we have several components to our nature. And those components influence the way we feel and think and act. The first, of course, is the one we're all familiar with, which is the animal soul. So there are 5 parts to the soul according to the system, and one of them is the animal soul. And what is the animal soul? That's the part we're all familiar with. We seek pleasure. We try to avoid pain. We try to structure our lives for safety, for security, etc. And we react more or less the way an animal does. In other words, when we're provoked, we react defensively, or we either run away or we run toward and fight. We take our little nuts like the squirrels and hoard them for the winter so that we'll be safe in the winter time or in our retirement or whatever. And that's part of us. It's not a bad part of us. It's part of us. The problem is that when we are disappointed, which we are almost from the day we're born, whether it's a broken doll or a mother not appearing when you need her, we suffer. We suffer, and a cruel suffering. It may not seem much to us that a kid is crying over a broken doll, but it means a lot to them. Well, when you suffer like that, you want to escape it. You want to escape that suffering. And so you begin to long for something that's more sustaining than the things that come and go in our lives, the goods, the material things, even the lovers, we want something more solid, more sustaining. And so those disappointments begin to wake us up. And there's another aspect to our soul described in this system, this Kabbalistic system, which is called ruach, or breath. And it's the part of us that floats, that leaves our body when we sleep, that goes to the angels and gets instructed by the angels during our dreams. And I think all of us have had dreams which we know are not regular dreams. In these dreams, we're told things, or we're instructed in things. And that's that part of our soul that's getting instructed. It's beginning to show us how to emerge from just being animalistic. And I don't mean animalistic in the negative, sense of just being very greedy and whatever. I'm just talking about our nature. We need to protect our physical being. and our emotional comfort. So this begins to stir our soul. And in midlife, very often people abandon what they were told was good for them, and they call it a midlife crisis. But I think it's a kind of a call to remember what you were about. It may express itself in things that don't seem very serious, like buying sports cars and leaving your wife and so on. But fundamentally, people are trying to find a way to their core, to get back, to find meaning and centeredness and a deep kind of joy in their life, even if we go about it in misguided ways. But anyway, now we're awakened. Now we're yearning. We're struggling. How do we connect to what is called the higher soul? And the higher soul, which is associated with wisdom, which is associated with compassion, is the part of us that knows. I'm not talking about knowledge. I'm not talking about, that 2 + 2 = 4. I'm not talking about that kind of knowing. I'm talking about a different kind of knowing. The kind of knowing that's coming directly from the mysteries, from the Godhead, the part of you that knows exactly what you're doing, why you're here, what the purpose of your life is. But we can't hear it. The Bahir, one of the mystical books of Kabbalah, says the higher soul speaks once and never repeats itself. We have to be able to hear it. But it's part of us. It's not part of somebody else. It's not part of the guys who have made it to the top of and I'm saying guys because it's mostly those who publish about it. They're who've made it to the top of the food chain, so to speak, and can tell you how to live and how to be happy and whatever. It's part of you. You know all that stuff. But the problem is that because of the protections of the animal soul and the internal dialogue, which tells us how the world is ordered, there's so much noise that we can't hear it, which is why meditation is valuable. Meditation silences the mind, even if it's temporarily, and you have access to certain insights that you weren't able to have access to before. It's sitting there, it's waiting. It's not coming from the outside, it's coming from you. It's your power. To get to that, and which means that you begin to live more authentically, you begin to live with greater joy. We need to quiet our minds because we have a lot of stories going on inside of us. And we're also very complicated. So our animal soul gets frightened when we're threatened. Our emotional body is concerned with its health and love and also can easily be threatened. So we try to protect ourselves, right? And the protections that we have often arise in childhood when they're not very, well, they're not grown up. They're not grown up protections, and they can be very self-defeating. Very self-defeating. So this is a work of a lifetime when you're gradually climbing the steps of consciousness, opening up your mind. And remember, you've done this before many, many, many times. A little baby becomes a toddler, starts out, totally attached to its mother, and at age 2, or at least in most cases, kids just start screaming and behaving very badly. I mean, I don't know this scientifically, but I know that they're changing. They're changing, not only physically, but mentally. Kids grow up really fast and they go through all these changes. But their consciousness is growing, their awareness is growing, their understanding is growing. Probably more easy to access in terms of an example would be the transition from childhood to teenage life, which I actually don't remember. I remember it was kind of uncomfortable. I'm talking about the transition. The transition is when you really want to still be playing with dolls, but you also want to be grown up and hang out with your friends and whatever. I didn't go to the mall. There were no malls in my day, but and go to the mall and hang out with your friends or whatever. There's a transition that goes on between childhood and teenage life, which of course is hormonal also and physical. And it's really, really hard. It's tough. It's tough. And it takes a while to adjust to it. but we do adjust. And then we become teenagers, and then we make a transition from teenage life to young adulthood and to going into the workforce. And that's a huge transition too, requiring a complete change in our mental state. So we're constantly changing. And then if we have other life events like becoming parents or, engaging in a business or finding partnership or whatever, these all cause us to grow, or in some cases to contract. But the thing is that we know this, we've done it before, but when you get to, in this society anyway, in this culture, when you get to be a certain age, nobody's interested in your transitions anymore. Nobody talks about it. You're just supposed to go along and, like, I don't know, you've done your thing, you've made your money, or you've had your children and raised them, or whatever constitutes adulthood in your life. It's supposed to be finished now. Consciousness, I mean, not your life. But it isn't. There's constant pressure internally for you to wake up and change. And that's another growth. And that's a growth into your authenticity, into your wisdom. And that's why old people, or at least in different societies, are so respected, because they see differently. They've been through it all and they see differently. So it's a journey worth taking. Now, people stumble along the way because it's hard. And we know of people who stumble on their way to adulthood and keep repeating childish behaviors well into their 40s and 50s. I mean, there are people, women and men, who never can, who just do serial dating or multiple dating, and they never stop. They're in their 40s and 50s, still going out and dropping people, and still going out and dropping people. We know that there's something wrong with that behavior. We look at it, we know that there's something wrong. So we get stuck. That's part of the process. You don't always see the way clearly. But if you keep going and you do a certain spiritual practices, your eyes open up. So where once you were the star of the movie because, and everybody revolved around you, how your parents behaved or misbehaved or so forth, or how they treated you, then you become the person that can be criticized by others. You become the person who now can understand that life is much more complicated than you thought. And yet at the same time, we're only here for a moment. We're only here for a moment. And I don't know how other people respond. I imagine there's a whole range of responses. But now that I'm in my 80s, I can say I can hardly remember most of the stuff that happened, which seems so incredibly important at the time. I mean, it just seems like, I don't know, like it's very fragile. That's what I'm saying. It's very fragile. But a spiritual practice teaches you that. It teaches you that you are truly humble because you don't know where you came from and where you're going after you die. You are subject to a lot of different circumstances, some of which can really throw you off your feet and undermine you or end your life suddenly and so on. You understand that. You begin to get a better relationship to you in the world. Despite what your belief system is and all the things that you try to do, it doesn't seem like very much at the end. I think and again, I'm speaking for myself, what seems like a lot is if you can connect, and it doesn't seem like a lot, it is a lot. If you can connect to a greater reality, if you can feel that greater reality infuse your life, you begin to understand you're part of an organic whole. You're here for a reason. You're God's creature, and you're just trying to do the best you can. So there's no need to dump on yourself, We're just all trying to do the best that we can. But the spiritual practice enables you to feel it, not to hear about it from the pulpit, that this is the way it is, and people talking about God and whatever, although it's actually feeling it. It's actually walking with that consciousness, walking with it, feeling supported, feeling taken care of, feeling It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, and it doesn't mean that you necessarily understand more, but you're much easier, much more accepting about it. So the pathway to shutting up, which is really, the access to the higher soul, is really through these practices. Now, there's all types of meditation, and sound meditation is one of them. If you do sound meditation, you become aware that it silences your mind. And during that period that your mind is silenced, and you're not really striving to silence your mind, the sounds do it themselves. Different voices come in. You hear things maybe from your past or things about yourself, and that are very helpful. I mean, certainly in the course of my life, there have been moments when I heard a voice say, "What are you doing?" And I did it anyway for another 10 years, you know, but that the question was valid. What are you doing? And what I was doing did not make any sense at all. I was living somebody else's life or whatever. Who knows? I can't even remember anymore. I just remember getting that message. What are you doing? And knowing that what I was doing was wrong. But when I say wrong, I mean wrong for me. But for whatever reason, I didn't want to upset the apple cart. It was too frightening. It was too demanding. It was too much trouble, whatever. I mean, those are decisions we can each make individually. But the value of the process is amazing. Now, the other thing that I've mentioned many times is the ability to look at yourself and examine yourself without judgment. Not criticizing yourself for doing some behavior you've done many times in the past that can't seem to stop. Not analyzing it, although there's benefit in analyzing and understanding why you are constituted in a certain way. But to really, really cut to the chase, if you just look at what you're doing calmly and without judgment, that behavior will reveal itself to you. It will tell you why you're doing it. And you'll be able to stop, not because you had the insight. It was your insight. It's coming from you. And it's clear. Now, in my case, what the insight that I got about the way I went about my day and the way I went into rants in my head about just injustices from the past and whatever, was really a diversionary tactic in my case. I was trying to avoid something I didn't really feel like looking at. So I filled my head with angers from the past. I'm talking about things that happened 50, 60 years ago, right? They're really not relevant anymore. They're long gone. So you probably would be able to point that out to me. It's not genius, Any one of you might have said, "Oh, what are you doing? You seem to be avoiding something." But I came to it myself, and that had power. That had real power. And I dropped the behavior almost immediately upon realizing it, because I don't really like suffering, and I was causing myself to suffer through the way I thought. I mean, it wasn't just damaging me, it was damaging the people around me, because I was like contents under pressure when I was going through a really unpleasant internal dialogue. But there are thousands of examples. You didn't speak up at the interview. You didn't get the raise you want. You played in a tournament and you lost out, and you can't forgive yourself, and you're jealous of the person who won. I mean, there's like millions of these. I knew a woman who every time she put on a clean dress, she would pour coffee all over the front of it. I know, it was really quite remarkable. Anyway, she was like a big illustration for me, but we all do that. We all have repetitive behaviors and thoughts which are not helpful. And therapy is useful, but you can go to therapy, and when you're finished, you can understand the dynamic and still not be able to change anything. So it is important to remember that a clear mind changes a lot. So then when you say, "Why didn't I ask for the raise?" you can actually come to a clear idea about how you'll behave in the future. Ordinarily, our internal dialogue is very, very punitive. and not healthy. So it gets back to the quotes that I sent. One is to live the way you want. I don't mean stepping all over people or anything like that, but to be true to yourself, which requires a study, because in the process of our being educated, we forget who we are. We forget so much that we don't even remember how to get there, which is why these practices are important. But it's still there. That core that when we came out, when we were small, that we were either told to hide or we hid because we were trying to protect ourselves. We're like little blades of grass, we can be very easily stepped on and extinguished. So we hide our treasure inside of us. But to recapture that is a worthy goal. And then you do begin to see how fragile and because it's fragile, how significant it is. We're only here for a moment. We're only here for a moment, and we can have impacts, big impacts on people around us and on our path and on ourselves. So because of the practices, you do get to a point where you have a lot of compassion for what's going on around you, but you also understand that you can't change very much. You can't, you can intervene, and sometimes you can save someone, or you can intervene and change something, but by and large, you're not that strong. Even the people who have the ability to make sweeping decisions that affect the lives of the nation, as soon as they're out of power, things begin to return to the way they were before. French have an expression, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, which means the more it changes, the more it is the same. We can see that in the history of nations. Whether it's the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution or the American Revolution, things tend to follow a similar pattern. And the pull to the past is very great. Anyway, having said that, I just urge you, we're in such tumultuous, chaotic times. I personally don't think that the saga of this election is quite over. I think we're in for a lot of surprises before we come to the election. Maybe even continuing this month, I don't know. But in order to survive and get through all this, and what the outcome is because of it, we need to remain calm and clear and have an impact on ourselves and everybody around us that's positive through kindness and love, caring and calm. And this comes from cleaning up our own act, because we each individually project our stuff onto our society and onto our nation. So we have a responsibility to clean up our own act if we really want to soften whatever's going on right now. So just get comfortable, feet on the floor, eyes open or closed, distractions taken out, phones off and so on. Yeah.